Hi, Shruti.
Hi Andrea, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Good, good. Hi Ryan. Oh, I guess he's still connecting. Hi Ryan.
Hey, good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And happy March.
Oh, wow.
Was isn't it?
That came fast.
Yep. Hi Alex. Hi Curtis.
Hello, how you all doing?
Good, good. Have a lot of other folks joining. Hello,
Oh,
Debbie.
we seem to like cameras in
Hello.
the meeting, so I'll treat you.
Curtis.
Well, everybody except Ari. Okay.
Still have my iMason's background on. How do I get to settings?
It's okay. It's a good look. It's a nice background. Is there an OCP background?
There should be. It should be half and half.
That's,
Hey, Logan.
that's what true partnership looks like, Alex. Half and half. How's it going out?
Hey, that's action item for next monthly call.
Split background.
There I am, back in my natural environment.
Well, Alex and Andrea, good to see you again. I think we missed each other the past few weeks.
Yeah, good to see you, Ryan. I got back at 2 a.m. last night, a little later than expected from vacation. So I've
Ouch.
got my caffeine. But nobody feels bad for you when you're returning from vacation.
No, definitely not.
I feel bad that you're back, right? I think that's what it is, right?
Appreciate it.
That's how that goes. But we're glad to have you.
Appreciate it.
Do we have visibility for how many participants we're expecting for the call?
Not really. And frankly, I'm pleased to see the group that we have here. We had a sort of enormous group for the announcement of this work stream, which I think is great. Gives us a lot of visibility into with a lot of different organizations who are working on different aspects of this. And I think if we narrow to a smaller group of folks who are willing to take some action on this and willing to get involved, I think we have a lot we can accomplish. It'll probably be a little easier than if we have 200 people we're trying to wrangle. So that's part of our agenda for today is just to organize around what it is we want to take on in terms of concrete work and solicit some volunteers. So we'll get there. But while we still have folks signing in, I'll wait to dig into that for a sec.
Just a admin question here. Is there a meeting note stock that everybody can take a look at?
I don't have one yet.
If not,
Ryan,
we can create one.
if you wouldn't mind.
Yep.
That would be great. There are Curtis and I are here from Seagate. And Curtis, you're here. You should have been in my meeting last night. But we have a lot of people who are interested, and meeting notes really help.
For sure. I've got a document open, but it's not set up to share yet. So it just has the agenda, Ryan, that we had reviewed.
Yep. And I'm just gonna copy and paste from your email into a Google Doc.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, I think for some of our group, the first few weeks we've had a few back and forths that we've just sort of missed each other because of not aligning on Google Docs or simple things like that. But I think we met on Tuesday as a team and with Kelly as well. And I think we're all pretty squared away now with groups.io.
Yeah.
And also just sticking with Google Docs. So you have it here. So Alex, You can just,
Yeah,
you're
it's
able to share.
not shared yet, but what I'll do is I'll take notes live, and then I'll make sure that it's on the Google on the groups.io after that.
Okay.
I know the groups.io is a little clunky, but I think we're getting the hang of it. So let's start off with some housekeeping or some administrative updates. The first of which is very exciting and means a lot for our group, which is that we are welcoming Kelly Jensen as a leader of this work stream. Kelly is from Meta. I'm wondering, Kelly, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you. I'm Kelly Jensen. I've been with Meta for 2.5 years, and I'm part of an organization that's responsible for supply chain and engineering. I work closely with our sustainability arm as well. And I am the net zero lead, so I'm responsible for Scope 3 emissions, which represent a little more than half of Meta's Scope 3 emissions, which account for 99% of our overall emissions. Great to meet you all and excited for this work.
Yeah, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
And
An
as a
awesome
reminder,
background. Sorry.
yeah, no, I didn't mean to interrupt. So absolutely, super relevant background, Kelly. We're lucky to have you here. And as a reminder, the leadership of this group is myself and Andrea Desimoni from Schneider, Kelly, who you just met, Ryan from Google. Maybe Ryan, you could just reintroduce yourself briefly.
Yeah, hey, Ryan Cornwell, TPM, Technical Program Manager for Google Data Centers on the Advanced Technology Innovation Team. I'm actually pretty new to the sustainability side of things, but I've been focused mostly on like bigger strategy, development questions, and some other incubation projects that we've been working on to build data centers faster, cheaper, more efficiently.
And then Lalit Joshi from Microsoft. Is Lalit on the phone?
I think he's not on the call right now.
He's not on the call yet. So Lalit also, his day job is lifecycle analysis at Microsoft. So we have Google, Meta, Microsoft represented in the leadership of this group, which is important because at the end of the day, we're talking about what is the digital infrastructure industry going to be requiring of vendors to this industry in the way of carbon disclosure. So being able to have those three extremely influential companies together in this project, leading the project, is going to mean a lot in terms of the potential for what we can accomplish. And then as far as Andrea and I go, we work on the sustainability team for our data center industry at Schneider, so we can hopefully bring some expertise and perspective from a vendor perspective. So Schneider as a software vendor, as an equipment vendor, how do we measure and report on our embodied carbon, and kind of how do we fit into this ecosystem? And hopefully we can do a little bit of representing that vendor ecosystem in the conversation. That said, that's just the leadership group, and we're relying on everybody who's on the call to add additional context and bring your own perspectives from how you fit into the industry to make sure that we're successful in creating some guidance and some deliverables that are going to be valuable to everyone. So
Alex, just one moment.
Yeah,
What you
Gary.
said is really awesome. Having that, because we're going to share these notes within our organization. Most of our leadership for sustainability is in Singapore, so they can't attend this call. Having that what you just said, like as a header, like these are the leads, would really help us disseminate within Seagate.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry. Yep.
And I will fill that in a little bit after the call.
Thank you.
And Alex, I know Lalit is in India, so I think maybe, I'm not sure how this typically works for OCP, but we could rotate, APAC friendly meetings if that's helpful.
Yeah, let's put
I
that
think
on.
Friday morning, US time is not going to be the regular cadence, right? This was only the first session that was moved. So
This is a reschedule, right?
Yeah, then Lalit, I think, will be fine. It's because it's Friday evening for him after the session moved from.
Just giving a quick note of that.
So it was Wednesday mornings before it moved.
Yeah.
Like on the OCP calendar, it is actually Wednesday mornings every month on the site.
Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Ryan, anything else you want to say from a housekeeping administrative standpoint in terms of the use of groups.io or Google Docs or anything else?
No, I think you nailed it all. I just, personally, I'm still learning to navigate through that. But I think as we all get more comfortable, we'll be a little more effective with our communications across the team.
Okay, cool. So just seeing if I have.
And I guess we should probably take a look, Alex, make sure probably the most important document in my mind right now is just the charter and making sure that it lives in the file repository.
Mm-hmm. And I can bring up that charter.
As bringing that up, Alex, I want to interject on the housekeeping real quick.
Please, yeah.
There's been talk about notes, which is great. That'll be super helpful to all companies who want to get involved and know who's who within the project. But I really want to emphasize, and I dropped the link in the chat, signing up for groups.io, making sure you're able to log in there. I'll also drop my email in the chat. So if you do have a challenge, you should also share that with anybody on your team who wants to join. Anybody who's interested in this work stream that is, not even a member of the Open Compute project, that's not a requirement. So anybody who's interested, please sign up for that. That's where the communication will come.
Great. Thanks, Rob. And Rob, do you want to just introduce yourself quickly?
Oh yeah, sure. Hi everybody, Rob Coyle. I'm the Community Technical Program Manager here at the Open Compute Project. I work directly for the foundation, so I'm responsible for our contribution process and works that come out of our work streams and projects. We're responsible for the framework that allows our wonderful volunteer leaders and our community members to put this work together.
Yeah, so thank you, Rob. And I don't want to completely rehash everything that we did on the opening call in terms of contextualizing OCP and iMasons and the collaboration, but I do want to mention again for everybody, anybody on the call who may have missed that first one, you are in a meeting of a collaboration between two organizations that are very influential in the digital infrastructure industry. Open Compute Project, which Rob represents, and the iMasons Climate Accord. And so those two organizations have a formal collaboration, and this is the first major project that's come out of that agreement to collaborate. And it's an important area of collaboration because of the value that each organization brings to the table. So OCP, probably most of the folks on the call are already familiar, was founded to develop and share open standards that are going to allow the data center industry to become more efficient. Recognition that we are all in the same boat, and the more that we can share, the more that we can recognize shared business value, even among competitors. And the iMasons has traditionally been very effective home for networking within the, what they say, digital infrastructure, data center, broadly defined industry, place where we can collaborate on things like sustainability, but also diversity. And so iMasons with their terrific community that they bring to the table, OCP with the experience in developing guidance and standards, are sort of two halves of what we hope will be a very impactful whole. And the challenge that's on the table in front of us is twofold: encouraging more vendors to the data center industry to disclose the embodied carbon and potentially the operations phase carbon of what they're providing, and then standardizing the format in which they provide that information. And sort of embedded within that standardization is comparability. So we want to make sure that data center operators at the end of the day have as full a data set as possible in terms of the parts and pieces that go into building the data center, both core, shell, heavy equipment, IT, that they can make the most use of that data as possible by making it comparable. So if the means and methods used to measure and report on embodied carbon make the information from one vendor incomparable with the information from another, then it's not going to be of much use in terms of making a procurement decision, making a design decision. And then the phase two that we had discussed initially was getting more suppliers involved. And do we, once we've sort of completed our phase one scope of work, move on to thinking about a standardized RFI requirement or RFP requirement that we could get major data center operators who are involved to agree to, that would not only encourage more participation from vendors, but also streamline the process for vendors so they wouldn't have different requirements depending on which data center operator they were selling to in any particular case. So this is a living document, and we're always open to feedback on this charter. I can try to drop a link to this charter into the notes. You know what? I'll put it in the meeting notes, and it makes it hard to see my. I'll put it in the meeting notes here. And then there are a couple of more specific issues that the leadership team wanted to discuss when it comes to the scope. So the first is what is the actual meat of the work that we're going to focus on right off the bat? So the first thing that we are considering at this point is defining the contents of a carbon disclosure, that being sort of the first step of our work. So the next item on our agenda is label versus disclosure. So I'll get to that in a second, but just to use disclosure as a generic term here, we're thinking through what does a vendor to the data center, digital infrastructure industry need to be reporting on in order for this data to be of use to data center operators. And here it's helpful to think about what the data center operator is trying to accomplish. I talked about procurement decisions, design decisions, that's one thing. But also it's just tracking the decarbonization vendor by vendor. So sort of comparing a vendor to itself over time. And so we want to think through, okay, starting with an embodied carbon number, report that, maybe also report the method that was used to arrive at that number. And then beneath that, what database did you use? What third-party organization did you work with? What assumptions, what important assumptions are sort of embedded in the process that you use to arrive at that number? And so those are all either items on a carbon disclosure or items on a carbon label. And it's important to mention that the carbon label has sort of been an organizing concept for this work group, for the iMasons Climate Accord in general. I think we'd all like to get to a place where we can slap a nutrition style label on the side of a piece of equipment that's going to be sold into our industry and be able to compare one to another. The hesitancy we have around the word label at this point is that it does imply that comparability. I know when I go into the grocery store and I'm looking at Fruit Loops versus Golden Grams, even if they're not made by the same company, I know that the grams of sugar is comparable one to another. I know that they're both extremely healthy options, no matter which I choose. And so is it better to say disclosure, which acknowledges, okay, each vendor is disclosing a number based on their own methods, and those methods can also be included in that document and kind of a void label for that reason. And I'd like to pause here since I've been monologuing and that's a lot of information. Any thoughts, feedback on this first part of the scope, which is defining the carbon disclosure and this question of disclosure versus label?
Hey, Alex, I have one quick. We covered this last night in the meeting with our sustainability team in Singapore. For us, we're extremely conservative. So to get ISO validation for the aluminum smelters and vendors we use, we had to pay, and we covered it for them because we're they need help because of the sold down last year. So we went ahead and we paid $10,000 per vendor to get ISO validation for I forget the ISO standard, but the ISO stuff. And it's an ongoing thing. It's going to be 4K a year. So do realize that there is a cost for not just us as kind of the big companies, but also for the smaller companies, some of whom are struggling. And that's in addition to the project manager who has to cover that. So I just want to make sure that we all understand the costs involved. I'm sure, Alex, you know this, but I just wanted to bring it up.
It's an important point, Ari, because I was going to get to this when we talk about what the iMasons is working on for context, is we want to figure out how high to set the bar, essentially. So, if we, as this group said, okay, in order for your carbon disclosure to be acceptable by the people who sign on to this, it needs to be ISO 14025 compliant, certified. That sets a bar high enough that it's going to discourage involvement from certain vendors who don't have the resources. That said, a data center operator has the right to require whatever they want to require as part of a competitive process, and this is a competitive business, and so vendors can decide whether to invest or not. And I will take some hands here. I'm not sure what order these are in, so Mitchell.
Good morning. How are y'all doing today? So I worked at a line data center. Past year I've been working on labeling and working on our embodied carbon tracking for assets. So as for setting the bar, honestly, I think where we're at, I think the bar needs to be very, very low, because we want to try to get the whole picture. And the biggest challenge right now is comparability and actually being able to compare the different kinds of studies, whether it's EPD, TM65, because again, like you said, there are some thresholds you have to meet to get these certain studies, but we kind of need all of it to actually get a usable picture of it. So the biggest challenge again is creating some sort of value that based off of the study. So looking at all the different types of studies, what is that value compared to another, and then creating a tolerance or an error value to actually be able to roll up those numbers, because just having the value of a single object can be nice, but it doesn't paint the whole picture. It doesn't paint the embodied carbon health. As for the actual label, honestly, just having a QR code is really good, just because people walking around the data center don't really have a whole lot of use for the data on there. But being able to access it and then utilizing a UUID creates a use for every different phase. So platform delivery can now use it for their commissioning software, scanning. Operations can use it for digitizing CMMS. You can still scan it to actually access whatever embodied carbon platform you're using. So it gives it that multi-use function. So you're actually getting more value out of it. For what's included, obviously the LCA study, what is the model, the vendor, the serial number. But again, keep it very agnostic, because I know a lot of people don't like sharing a lot of the specific information, but just having that very agnostic information on there along with the study. And then on the back end, being able to roll it up so the stakeholders can actually roll up, okay, this data center has this rolled up, this data hall has this rolled up, this room. So different ways to actually roll up and take snapshots.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, I don't need to reflect everything you just said, but I think those are all great points. Melissa?
Yeah, hi. I'm Melissa Spanish from HPE, from our sustainability team, specifically the group that focuses on product sustainability and innovations. So I had a comment, and I don't know how much you want to get into, detailed discussions of all these data points or all these, sort of line items on the agenda here at this point. But I think an important aspect to consider as we look at the mission and the scope is how prepared the the client companies, the people who are purchasing and using this information, are to process it. Because what we've found a lot of times is that the folks that we are talking to with our customer companies in their IT groups, they've been told that they need to ask for product carbon footprints or sustainability related information, but they don't really know what to do with it. And so specifically, this is around the discussion of, label or disclosure, and do all of the vendors need to essentially unify on a single methodology? Because if they don't, then the outputs are really not comparable. And so, if vendors can use, whatever methodology they're using in-house, and then we start to get into the points that Mitchell brought up, is that, like, to ask all the vendors, to unify on a particular ISO standard is going to get incredibly expensive. And we're already being asked to unify on a number of methods for regulations. And so, you know, we really have to understand whether or not the people that will be receiving this information are going to have the necessary resources to interpret it, even if the vendors are providing complete, you know, transparency into their method. Will the purchasers really be able to process that information in a meaningful way? So I'd love to hear more from some of the folks on the call. Maybe that's not today, maybe that's in the future, a future discussion. But I think it will be important to get their viewpoint and how prepared they are to actually receive this information.
Yeah, a really good point, Melissa. And I think we've done a lot of sort of assuming that once the data is there, we can instantly start to use it to optimize data center designs and to inform procurement and the rest. But it's good to ask the question of, is the machinery ready for it? Rich?
Yes. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. One question, is this charter already approved or is this a candidate charter?
So we have approval for this charter through OCP and iMasons, but that said, it's not set in stone.
Wow.
And we expect and are looking for the members of this group to help refine it.
Okay, so first I want to split apart disclosure from labeling and completely table the entire labeling discussion. I want to second Mitchell, Ari, and Melissa's comments. There's no need for a label. There's already codes on every product out there. There's already clear disclosures for power and wattage that are required by US regulators. So no new labels. And in fact, a quick scan of the companies involved in this call right now, a total of none of your sourcing teams would be willing to pay more for that label. None. So I don't know where this is coming from. I do understand that disclosure is important, but that can be accomplished through electronic means. That's already done through power supplies and a host of other things that are happening in the industry and have been happening with the EPA and other areas, Energy Star, et cetera, for over a decade. So I'm not sure what we're doing here, especially when I look, if the goal is carbon, I look at carbon and go, okay, you already have the power data and you're not, in my personal opinion, the sourcing teams are not really using that data. So why on earth would you think they'd use the carbon data? And so I just don't believe another label is required. I do believe disclosure needs to improve in a uniform fashion, but that's a significant multi-million-dollar cost. That's a barrier to entry for smaller OEMs. And that will be fought significantly by the industry. And if I'm the first one telling you that, I'm sorry, but that's going to be a non-starter. And so I think it's very important everybody's grounded in the realities of the commercial situation before we start down this path. Thank you.
Yep, Rich, I think that those are all items that we have considered and are working through, right? So this is the reason that we're talking about label versus disclosure. What is the value of, I think a label has a lot of organizing value in that there's a lot of folks interested in, could we get to this point where we had a nutrition label? But as Mitchell pointed out, once you're walking around the data center, we don't really need this data anymore. What we need is a digital source of these carbon disclosures so that they can inform design, engineering, and at some point procurement. And we hear this very clearly from across the industry that this is what data center operators are looking for. In terms of setting the bar, that's the next, it's already something that we've been chewing on as part of this agenda. We need to make sure that we are setting the bar high enough that it's moving the ball forward in terms of getting data center operators the data they need without excluding vendors from the process. So we can talk about that as we go through this process, go through our work for the year. how do we develop guidance / standards adequate to make that demonstrable progress without excluding or alienating certain OEMs. And with that, I'm going to go to Shruti and then I'll go back to you, Ari.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Alex, actually, I wanted to add a point to the last two comments, I guess. So one thing is, I think maybe we are, honing in too much on the use of whether we're using the word label or disclosure kind of thing. To Rich's point, it might be a completely digital thing. We don't need like a physical label, etc. So how the format in which it's finally going to be represented, I think that's something that will evolve as we talk through it. And the other part of, where there was a mention of, I think Melissa was mentioning that, there needs to be more standardization for the methodology and the ISO. Yeah, we completely, I think, agree front and center. We are actually also trying to talk about the fact that there is more standardization in the methodology needed. Like, in fact, the ISO standards that are there right now also actually allow a lot of variability. Like being compliant with the ISO standard doesn't completely mean that it's one method followed. So that is also front and center as as a target problem to solve for us. So hopefully, we can in parallel try to address or push both of these, moving it a little bit ahead.
Yeah. Yep,
Oh,
well said.
lastly, I think at this point, there is at least some need arising for looking at carbon data from like a user's perspective. I think we are sort of in a little bit of chicken and egg kind of problem where there isn't reliable data and methodology is not defined. So of course there is hesitance in releasing it, and because any data that might be released does not come with a standard methodology, there is a hesitance in asking for it. So I think there is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem there. But if we are able to standardize this format and the methodology a little bit better, then it will encourage folks to start to ask, use it, and also to provide it. Like, it'll help both the sides.
Yep, completely agree. We can't wait on both sides for the other side to make the first step. I think if we have a great opportunity here with both vendors and operators at the table to start the ball rolling. Ari, did you have something else before I start to frame this up in terms of other efforts and what we can do?
I put in the chat the French or France greenwashing standard, which is the high bar, and that's our bar. I think I totally agree with Rich's comments. Unfortunately, I go into the weeds. I'm not a vision guy so much as I dig down. I spent 18 years at Microsoft. On much of that on the kernel team, working with OEMs, and the margins on, say, the laptop you're looking at right now are incredibly low. We had fights over a 10-cent label that you'd place on. You see one probably from Intel on your computer right now. So it was such horrible feedback that we actually removed the label. You don't see a Microsoft label, even though it's a Windows machine or a Windows label. So I just have to agree with what Rich said, and actually your response was good. So that's it. Just look at the French standard and see if that's something we need to worry about.
I think we've got a burgeoning consensus here around whether we're really talking about a label that slaps on the side of a air handler, or we're talking about digital information that discloses embodied carbon data and contextual data, metadata that goes around that can be leveraged in various ways, the way that Mitchell described. So I think this is a productive conversation. The other items on the agenda that I wanted to get to are a quick review of concurrent work going on outside of this group, and then start to coalesce around some action groups. Since this is a working group, we need another term. So I guess like action group, where we can volunteer and start to hash some of this stuff out. So just to make sure that we have this context, I just wanted to mention that iMason's Climate Accord, Rich, to something you said, is organized in 3 working groups. One is around carbon disclosure for power, which, as you noted, is already pretty mature in terms of how we measure and report on the carbon that comes with purchased power. One for materials, so core and shell of the data center, and then one for equipment, which I helped to lead. And in the equipment working group, what we did over the past year was to develop case studies for the LCA EPD method of measuring and reporting on embodied carbon, TM65 method through CIBC. Andrea on the call has been very instrumental in those. And we're just finishing one on an economic input-output method, kind of the lowest bar. And there, the intent was very much to describe the diversity of methods that could be used to measure and report on carbon for an equipment vendor in this case, so as to bring more people into the boat, and not to say it's full life cycle analysis and EPD or nothing, and to analyze the pluses and minuses of each, including resource intensity, both in terms of dollars and person hours. What that group on the iMason side is going to be focusing on in the coming year are sort of guidance documents, like how to get started as an equipment vendor to the data center industry in measuring and reporting. So if I'm starting from scratch, if I don't have a lot of money to dedicate to this, how can I start to get a program going? What are the first steps? What's the maturity model, the maturity progression? And then from the operator standpoint, same thing. And this sort of gets to, Melissa, your point. We had envisioned a guidance document about how to start engaging your supply chain to measure and report on embodied carbon. But maybe part of that, based on your comments, should also be, how do I ready my own organization to make use of that data? So I'm not just asking my vendors to report, but I'm also putting the machinery in place so that we can actually make that part of our digital twin as we are designing our data center, part of our procurement process, or what have you. So I feel like that work on the iMason's Climate Accord side will be complementary to what we're doing here. By no accident, that group is going to be steering away from doing what we are talking about here, which is defining what goes into this carbon disclosure, and really focusing more on that guidance and support role. The other effort that I wanted to bring up here, which is very nascent, comes from you, Shruti, which is the PCR and PSR, or PCR really, piece of this. That is product category rule. So that is a set, both a method and a data set to develop a life cycle analysis for a particular piece of equipment. And we've recognized in previous meetings from this group that there's a need for new PCRs, especially when it comes to semiconductor products. That's not going to be part of what we do in this group, but it's an effort that under Shruti's leadership for sustainability at OCP, we're looking to get underway. So I want to mention that as a sort of piece of the puzzle. Both of those are pieces of the puzzle that are not happening in this group, but will hopefully support what we're doing. And to mention that if you're interested, especially in the PCR topic, and you have some expertise to bring to bear, to reach out to Shruti or myself to get involved in that. Anything to add to that, Shruti? Okay, I think that was a no.
I could not get to my unmute, but no, you framed it right. And I think Melissa also mentioned that, there is difference in the methodology. So we do see it front and center that there's a need for helping out with standardizing the methodology of the PCR. Yes, we are trying to sort of get expertise together in order to push that task. So if any of you are having expertise or know folks who would be appropriate to help that item in parallel, please reach out to us, and it'll help us start up that effort.
Yep. And it occurs to me that in this conversation, we don't all know each other yet. It's probably helpful if we just say where we work during the day as we contribute comments, so we can start to get a sense of, okay, this person has some expertise to bear from the operator perspective, from the vendor perspective. Shruti's from Microsoft and also leads sustainability at OCP. Ari, did you want to mention what Seagate, or describe Seagate quickly for us? I'm not sure if Ari heard me.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I mean, Seagate is, along with WD and Toshiba, we're the three leading hardware, HDD manufacturers. And my role is in sustainability and security. So I'm part of the OCP security group, part of the OCP storage group, and this group and a couple of others that
You're very active in the sustainability group as well.
Yes.
You show up to a lot of meetings.
Well, I'm the ecosystem lead at Seagate. So
yeah, so storage, which is nice, again, kind of a piece of the ecosystem. Obviously, speaking from Schneider's perspective, we don't work in that the IT part of the equipment equation.
Yeah, it's surprisingly large part of the equation.
Yeah, it is
just
indeed.
that way. Yeah.
All right, so that's the kind of work that's going on outside this group. Now I want to focus on action groups for this group, to use the word group too frequently here. We have talked among the leadership about three different things. One is a survey of existing standards and concurrent projects. So the topic that we're discussing is a hot topic in the data center industry. It is a hot topic in the infrastructure industry at large. Everybody's sort of trying to figure out, a lot of people, I think, had the same dream at the same time where they were like, oh, a nutrition label would be perfect on the side of a piece of equipment if it could document carbon. And I'm not reopening that conversation right now. We've had a lot of good discussion about why that's maybe not a good fit for our context. But the broader topic of carbon disclosure is something that lots of different organizations are interested in working on. So I thought it'd be helpful if we had some volunteers who are willing to do some binging, some Googling to figure out kind of what existing groups are working on very closely related topics, especially in digital infrastructure data centers, so that we're not covering the same territory that somebody else is, another organization is at the same time. And if there is other efforts underway that we should be coordinating and cooperating with, it, we're doing so. So that's one. Two would be to start working on the disclosure. And this could be focused on the carbon disclosure for LCA EPD. We could be that method and other methods, and maybe we want to define a different disclosure, let's say form, if that's a good way to think about this. One for LCA EPD, one for TM65, and so on. But essentially, we need volunteers to start to think through what would we be asking of vendors beyond just the figure for embodied carbon. What else should be on that form in quotation marks that they would be filling out here? So that's number two. And then number three is this big thorny topic of comparability and standardization. So it's of real value just to get to the point where you say, okay, we've got a form. The vendor knows what they need to fill out here in order to be giving the data center operator what they're asking for. But the next big kind of the remaining yardage to get to the end zone is how do we advance comparability and standardization? And so if you have two vendors who are both investing in doing a lifecycle analysis for their product, for their UPS, let's say, they fill out the form that we're defining. Can we rely on a comparison between them? Lalit from Microsoft, who helps to lead this effort and who does LCAs for a living or works on LCAs for a living, is saying that there's really very little comparability, even if you're using the same method. And so this is a topic that I'm wondering if we could also be starting by just doing some thinking around and then deciding what kind of deliverable we could be creating to advance comparability and standardization. So those are the three. One is, who else is working on this stuff? What are they doing and how do we work with them? Number two is defining the actual disclosure form. Doesn't have to be a form, but just to think about it that way. And three is the comparability issue. And right now, I would love it if, oh, good. Raised hands, which I think could only mean volunteers. Eric, good to see you.
Hey, Alec. I don't know if I'm volunteering for any particular effort yet, but I just wanted to tee up. We're talking about the format of the disclosure, and I just want to highlight an issue that's endemic to the protocol that we're basing this on, for people to think about in terms of what kinds of things need specified, and that is, as we talk about LCAs, which is obviously tied up in your second workstream proposal here. When you do an LCA, part of what you're asked to do is estimate your lifetime scope 3, right? What's the footprint that results from using this thing that you made and you have for sale? Now, the guy in receipt of that, which is what we're trying to support here, the operator, whoever ends up with that device, is going to have an actual scope 2, right? That results from using that device. We need to foster the ability to refine that lifetime footprint over time. So that would imply then that the format we want must break out that estimate so that it can be displaced with better information later. And that's the kind of thing that I think we want to talk about here in terms of what does the disclosure need to have in it? How is it formatted? I just want to tee that up so people are thinking about it.
Yeah, Eric, great point, and absolutely, that's a great example of the kind of conversation that we're hoping will happen in this action group. So we need to figure out ways to distinguish between upstream scope 3, the embodied carbon of that product, the use phase emissions. So are those two different fields on this form? Are we limiting the form to one or the other? Those are the kinds of questions that we need to work out. So I'll go on to Mitchell, and then I'm going to add your name, Eric, to this action group. Mitchell, go ahead.
Hello again. I would love to be a part of 2 and 3, and then following up on what Eric. Yeah, absolutely. That honestly, that number needs to be included as a benchmark, but for the calculation, just left out. It's that then you're double dipping. That's effectively what you're doing. That's all I'll say about that.
Yep. Yeah, so we just need to be clear, and that's sort of part of the reason that we're undertaking this work in the first place, is to sort out this kind of thing, to make sure that we have the data in the right column so that it's actually usable. And the data center operators need to sort through and be like, okay, which part of this is operational emissions that are assumed by my vendor? How does that compare to what the actual operational emissions I'm expecting are in the field, and that sort of thing. Ari.
Yeah, I'll volunteer for number 1.
Great.
And Seagate has a pretty good survey of what's going out there, and we're probably really conservative. If we were to add a 4th action group, and part of my job is to be the buffer between our sustainability team and senior management at Seagate, is marketing, because we are very conservative with our marketing. Others are not. And some are, but I don't know if that's really a working group here, but if we're handing out trophies, then that's going to be pushed to marketing. So maybe that's just more of a side context that we need to continue to consider. I'm sure everyone here is aware.
Yeah, Ari, I think it's a good point, and it kind of fits within the comparability standardization topic, maybe, where
it does. Okay.
Yeah. What are we claiming? No, I mean, but I hadn't really thought of it in that way, so I think it's important to raise. And it's related to the French greenwashing standard you raised as well.
Yeah.
How do we temper or guide the claims that vendors are going to make about their equipment? What role can we have in that marketing piece?
Thank you. So I guess I'm signing up for 1 and 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others raising their hands. Ryan.
Well, Alex, just wanted to ask. I mean, I think as the co-leads, we should all be plugged into all 3 of these.
Yeah, I think so. So we may divide and conquer. We may try to show up to each of these, but you will have good participation from Ryan, Lalit, Andrea, and myself. Mitchell, did you have something else, or is that hand from before?
Oh, I just want to say I'd love to also be involved in 3. I'm very invested in that as well.
Terrific. All right. I will follow up with these notes and encourage more participation once we get some sub meetings scheduled. But at this point, just would open it up. Do we feel like these are the correct action groups? Have I missed anything? Other suggestions for our work going forward? Ryan, did you have something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add as a goal. I know we have our co-leads sync early next week. Maybe we should just have it as an objective to make sure we have breakout sub meetings set by next week, so we can start getting the teams together on a recurring cadence.
Great. And then we should also be aware that in April is the OCP Regional Summit in Lisbon, Peru. Lisbon, Portugal. I was like, that didn't sound right. Lisbon, Portugal. And so we need to think about what are we going to present. We submitted for a presentation and were accepted. So we have an opportunity to talk to the industry at that time about what we're working on. And then in October is the OCP Global Summit, where hopefully we'll be able to talk to them about what we did, not just what we are planning on doing, but what we've accomplished and where we go from there. And I will go to you, Rob.
Yeah, great call out on the kind of milestones of regional summit coming up in April and then global summit in October. There are great opportunities for work like this. I just want to reiterate now that as we've moved further in the conversation, you see the action group opportunities. If something keys out or you run into somebody in the industry or at your company, go, oh, I know somebody who knows something about that or who'd be a great asset. Please make sure to include them, invite them to Groups.io, point them to these meeting minutes, and look for meeting schedules coming from this team, hopefully next week.
Terrific. And then Rich?
Yes, I just want to get on the record. I do not agree with this charter, and I do not believe it properly represents what's going on. Just within the immersion group, we have a group figuring out how to remove the adhesive from labels so they can go in immersion, so they can be more energy efficient. The last thing we need is more labels on boards. That's the last thing we need. I will sign up for 1, 2, and 3.
Rich, your opposition to the physical label is well and duly noted, and your volunteering to support this is very much appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Rich.
And Rich, I think we are sort of agreeing that this may not need to be a physical label at all. Actually, I think we are agreeing with that.
Melissa.
Yep, I just wanted to say that I think the 3 action groups, they cover the most topical areas and the topics that need to be addressed. I believe that HPE will probably want to be involved in this somehow, since we're fairly new to the sustainability initiatives within OCP. I was told to just come and listen, so I should not sign myself up for anything right now. But I will speak with my management and see how we want to be involved, because I think we most likely do.
That's great. And Melissa, we appreciate you not just coming to listen, but speaking as well.
Oh, I have a really hard time just listening.
That's terrific.
and not raising my hand for things too. So I'm trying really hard not to volunteer at the moment.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to hearing from HPE. And then Chris.
Hi, I also have a hard time not speaking at meetings when I probably should just listen. My name is Chris Fletcher. I work at BP, developing the fluids for immersion cooling. And I'm new to this whole topic area. I'm really calling in just to listen and learn. But I do want to give a shout out to a work stream that we are developing in the cooling environments around fluid life cycle management. And one aspect of that work group will be around LCAs for the fluids that would be used for immersion cooling, either for single phase or two-phase fluids. So I am not qualified to volunteer for any of these action groups because, again, my experience is developing products for different kinds of lubricants, and I'm learning this whole aspect. But if anyone from this work group would like to participate in our work group and teach us, then we would be much appreciated. And I will continue to call in, and I will probably be quiet typically so that I can learn the sustainability aspect, the carbon accounting, and carbon labeling, and that aspect of our industry.
Yeah, very cool. Chris, thank you too for speaking up. And I'm glad we have that sort of diverse perspective here.
And Chris, I wonder too, I can send you the life cycle assessment case study that we did within iMasons. That might be helpful in that.
That would be great. And if anyone's I'm going to be in DCD, New York in a couple of weeks' time. So I think that there's quite a lot of sustainability things going on. So please teach me so I'm not a complete moron. I would really appreciate that.
Chris, good to have you as part of the community. Rich, did you have something else? There's that hand from before.
No.
Okay. All right. Anything else from anyone on the call before we close?
Hey, Alex, maybe just wanted to share as an FYI to the group. It relates to the first work stream around concurrent projects, but there was a webinar this week from the EPA. It was pretty good. They announced a $100 million project funded from the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically for a labeling program. Now they're only targeting construction materials like concrete, steel, and glass. But I think with the scale of the amount of money they're throwing behind this, it could have an impact on the larger industry. And I think it's certainly something we want to stay attuned to understand their progress in that space. Especially because they are working towards, at least from the webinar, they are working towards an actual physical label. And so I think we definitely wanted to understand how that project is progressing.
Really good call out. And I had seen these projects as well from EPA. And it's my sense from reading through their materials that maybe they haven't quite gotten around to grappling with the pitfalls that we're discussing here in terms of a label. So I think there's potential here to be the voice of an industry for the EPA as they work on this project, which is well funded, to make sure that we're steering it in a way that's going to work for our industry.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I think OCP can represent the voice of the industry, and the one other thing that I thought they had as a really good advantage is they do have a lot of experience with what they called sister labeling programs. So they've rolled out a lot of eco labels in the past. So probably some lessons learned from them as well.
Yeah, for sure. And not to put Andrea on the spot, but she has professional experience working on those labels before Schneider, with the current president of the iMasons who helped develop the EP label. So we've got some good expertise in those sort of sister government label programs in the community.
This is Fran Samatruda from Meta. One thing I might recommend for our next call is maybe we get really crisp on what we mean by these different words of disclosure or label, because I'm hearing like sticker label, eco label, digital label, I think it's probably useful for us to get really crisp on what we actually mean. And so we don't have this confusion of, are we trying to put a sticker on everything? Are we trying to create a standard you need to pay money to be certified again? Like, which one we're all talking about? Because I'm worried we're all thinking different things and think we're thinking the same thing.
Yeah, I think we can continue that discussion. I think that we actually made more progress on that than I thought we would today. It seems like we've got a pretty good consensus growing that we're not talking about a physical label here. And so from there, I think it's a good idea to get concrete about what we mean in terms of a digital disclosure, what form that takes. And part of that, I think, will be hashed out in work group number 1, but it's a subject that the bigger group should continue to refine.
So are you talking about etching a QR code on the drive?
So that's what it's been the subject of a lot of this discussion. I think that perhaps we are not talking about that. If there's a QR code, it'll point to a digital piece of information.
Exactly.
So I think that we can focus on that what is that digital form, what is the crosstab that we're talking about here? And then we can get into, is there really a use case for something physical on the piece of equipment? Something that a few of us in the leadership have been skeptical of from the beginning is when you're walking through the data center, of what use is the data at that point? What we really needed is in the design modeling, in the procurement stage, and then in engaging with suppliers over time to reduce. That is all the time we have. We will make sure that these minutes get out, schedule smaller group meetings for these action groups, and look forward to meeting next month.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.